Welcome to the Inside Silverstone podcast, a business-focused podcast covering all things tech, engineering and innovation. Hosted by me, Chris Broome, a huge tech, motorsport and gaming fan, and also the owner of Longhurst, a firm of lifestyle financial planners and independent financial advisors located in Silverstone, Northamptonshire. This is a series of unscripted and unpolished conversations with leading business owners, thought leaders and high-tech talent where we discuss their experiences within the Silverstone business and motorsport region. We will also be asking them to share their knowledge, insight and their thoughts on the future just for you. If you're looking to learn more about the Silverstone high growth region and commercially connect with like-minded peers, you've definitely come to the right place. Welcome to Inside Silverstone. Welcome to the next edition of Inside Silverstone. My name is Chris Broome and I am your host. Today I am delighted to welcome to the show Richard Wiggins, who is designer and founder of Pixel Creation. Richard, welcome to the show.
Hello.
Richard, if it's okay, very customary of me to quickly run through a quick career snapshot for our wonderful listeners, just so I can explain sort of the genesis from sort of the start of your career to where you are today, which is, as I've said, is sort of designer and founder of Pixel Creations, plus one or two other entities. So is it okay quickly run through your CV?
Sure, yeah.
So I grabbed this off LinkedIn. Actually quite short and sweet, which is very good. So career started back in sort of 97, is that right?
That's correct.
97 to 03, so a good stint working as a senior web developer at a multimedia company. So what was the company called?
The company was a bit of a mouthful called Spirahelic.
So I had actually written that down, Richard, but I didn't want to pronounce that incorrectly.
A bit of an odd name, yeah. So I think they're still going, I believe, but they shortened it to Spira eventually.
Okay.
So that was definitely and it was Spirahelic Multimedia as it was known, so it's quite a mouthful.
Yeah, and so but presumably that's where you sort of learnt your trade, cut your teeth, as it were.
I started there as a trainee web designer when I didn't really know what a web designer was, because back in 97, unless you were, it was pretty new. Web was very new. I don't know if many people remember, but we didn't even have an internet connection at home. Like, I was still young then. I was 18, 19. But yeah, we didn't have internet, and it was a small business, and we only had one computer at the office which connected to the internet when I started there. So it was like, even you were working on your own machines, you had like an internal network, I guess, like shared, but if you wanted to basically go online and upload a client's website, you had to go onto one machine and use and it was just a standard, 56k modem or something like that.
Yeah,
so,
very slow.
Very slow, really. And you can't obviously believe it now with how we all have our speed of connection and also everything's connected. The fact that you just had to sort of basically put it onto one machine so we could access the internet is a bit nuts. So
and what was the sort of genesis behind joining them and getting involved in a new area that even for yourself back then was unknown?
I was I'd basically, this was my kind of first proper job, I guess, and but I was really keen it's more like designer than developer. So I did graphic design. I'd done design at school, so that's what I'd studied. And I'd done actually remember going back to being quite young and did when I was 15 or something, a work experience at a local in Newport Pagnell, actually, graphic design agency. My teacher was very good at the time and knew I actually was quite, driven, but I actually knew what I kind of an area I wanted to get into, whereas a lot of students didn't. And this position came up, and he managed to sort of, get me to sort of get into that one. And a week or so doing that, and I really enjoyed it, and I had great feedback from them, and it's kind of like cemented that at least area of what I wanted to go into. And
it's lucky you had a teacher that's
I did,
that, because a lot of teachers
no, he was my tutor, and he was it was good. And obviously the fact that I did have a bit of a more of an idea than probably most, but an area I wanted to go into, and I was keen to sort of to explore, and that it just really cemented the fact that I'm not saying I was amazing, but I was actually working and helping them on real client jobs at the time, and doing some actual branding and working on logos and things like that, and sort of typography, and that was just probably my first real actual go over and like just drawing stuff at home and things of actually saying, oh, this is a career, and and this is something I've enjoyed doing and maybe I could do. So when it came to, I didn't go to university. That was a decision. I didn't want to go to university. I basically had enough after higher education of, I just wanted to get out there and work, and I just didn't feel for me that I wanted to go and just learn. Sometimes I regret that. It's one of those things. Partly for the experience and partly for certain things I wish I'd maybe had trained in terms of, but I still think I'm not saying I've made wrong. Well, I'm happy with the decision I made.
Yeah, university isn't for everybody, right? So,
no,
I went to university and left after a year.
Yeah.
I went into the wrong subject at Nottingham, interestingly, and just chose the wrong subject, passed my first year and then exited. And so I totally understand that it's not for everybody. So, yeah, good.
But so I basically just looked at everything I could find that was remotely related to design work around sort of. I was again based in Milton Keynes. I've lived and grown up in the area, and I was just trying to find something. And I think I enrolled in various career things, and this one position, I think, out of probably at least a couple of months of being not on it and looking around, was probably like the only design position that I'd actually seen come up, and. It was for a trainee web designer, and then I guess to a certain extent they say the rest is history.
Well, there it is.
I got the job.
Yeah, so 9703, obviously eventually sort of worked your way up to senior web developer position there, and then in 03 you left and you set up your own business, so Pixel Creation. So talk to us about Pixel. So that's been running for sort of 15, 16 years.
Yes.
So obviously going well. So it's still open, still growing,
still surviving. I started that back, obviously 2003, as you said, on the back of I wanted to sort of branch away from where I was. I looked at positions over time, and eventually, and at the time I had a few small projects and clients on the side, and some bits I was just doing, in my spare time because I'm keen to enjoy doing it, and getting paid for some of that. And I started having some contacts at some interesting things, and was like, maybe I can go it alone. And things were at a certain situation, else to just say with where the company, not me personally, but just there was some stuff going on, and I was kind of like I wanted to branch out, and it was either going elsewhere or going on my own, and I just felt at the time that was a route I wanted to take.
So how did it feel? So opening a company, so for those that are listening to this who don't run their own business, who are working somewhere, learning, educating, moving up the hierarchical chain, as it were, what was it like opening a company?
Scary. Very scary. And I was very naive. I mean, I was still young. I had very limited experience in terms of I had only worked at one place in my career, other than obviously your usual maybe starting jobs when you're growing up, and working at supermarkets and whatnot, all those kind of things. So I didn't have, I guess, a vast experience in terms of how different businesses worked, in terms of that, and that's something I do regret a little bit. But it's very scary. I probably didn't really have a lot of money saved up, so my wife at the time, I was married. I had married back then, and still am, and she was working full time, and obviously that probably gave a bit more security to it. But we did have we had a house and we had a mortgage, so responsibilities. Yeah, so it was it wasn't I was just on my own and just kind of or living at home or anything like that. I was still young, still in my early 20s, wanted to kind of go for it, and scary, but I probably, looking back now, I was probably a little bit nuts to sort of do it.
But sometimes you've got to be, right? And you learn quickly, presumably, and made some mistakes, but made some good decisions, and sort of 15, 16 years later, here we are. So some of the things that you guys do and support businesses with include website design, clearly, strategy, user interface design, user experience, I think is really important. Brand identity, equally very important. E-commerce, digital strategy, and a whole bunch of other stuff. So I just want to sort of just pick on a couple of those, and if you could just explain sort of how you help a business. Let's pretend for a moment I come to you as Longhurst, my business, and I said, I want to enhance, what is user experience and how do I enhance it?
Yeah.
So what would that be?
Well, I mean, it depends what you're applying that to. User experience is just how others will experience whatever product or app or website you have. So see what I tend to be in my my role is when I'm working on and doing a user experience role or as part of my job is generally on websites, because that's my bread and butter. Is the majority of my projects I'm working on are web-based. I have worked on other digital apps, and things like that. But for me, it's usually a web-based project. So it's the user experience side of it is as just hopefully what it sounds like is how users will actually experience your product or your site and how they will journey through that. So from reaching whether it's your homepage or from other pages or areas on your site, and then actually go through to you getting them to achieve what you want them to achieve on your site, or they can find what they're trying to find. So making the journey for them as easy as possible, but also from the business, coming back to Longhurst's point of view is what are you trying to get them to do or read or see, or how do you want them to interact, is to try and make sure that they do get that and make that as seamless as possible, and not hit any roadblocks, and hopefully enjoy that process and take anything that's going to get in the way.
And presumably some sort of bad examples of that. So I'm just trying to think. This isn't to do with Longhurst, or maybe it might be. But presumably some bad examples of that are websites where there's too much content, perhaps, or too many pages, or too many clicks for people to get to where they need to get to.
But I mean, a bad user experience or bad user journey can be in many things. It just can be something where they just physically can't find something very easily. You've got something that is very important, or it's either buried deep or it's not obvious. The navigation's poor. So whether that could be down to wording or where it is, or who knows, it could even just be down to sort of contrast and accessibility. So if you've got something just not very easy to see or something, then they might miss that. If you're using some iconography to try and get people to go through and it's not obvious what that is, maybe that's so it's a roadblock, or it could be this user experience is you're hiding, I wouldn't say you hide something, but you're blocking them with something. Maybe you are you're sticking a newsletter sign up pop up straight away, and sometimes there is merit in that, but usually probably wouldn't do it straight away as soon as you get there. But it's also like irritating users and putting things away, but which can turn them off and physically shut down a website because you annoyed them. Ads can be a big prime example of that. Ads done badly, and I've stopped using sites because of just the ads are just so annoying, and it will make the experience of trying to browse the website.
They can trim the pages.
Your pages jumping up and down, and personally, and it will affect users and their experience of that. So
also a mobile version of the app as well. So you can go onto someone's website on your PC and it looks beautiful and the functionality is great, but then you go onto the mobile version and it looks shocking, and the menu doesn't open properly.
Absolutely. And that's something I've been on board with personally, and as well as my business. Really, it really was quite seminal. I've gone to a lot of conferences over the years in the web industry, and I was at one where basically there's a guy who did write the book physically called Responsive Web Design, which is where a lot of this is what we generally experience now. On the whole, not everywhere, because as I said, there are still sites which don't work like that. But back quite a few years ago now, there's basically people weren't doing that, and the mobile devices and tablets were becoming more and more prevalent, and people were using them to browse the web. Whereas back whenever that, I can't remember how many years ago that was, the websites weren't responsive. They were just, they were like desktop websites, and you were almost impossible to use on the mobile.
You having to zoom in and stuff.
Zoom in and things, and it was just, didn't work. But I was there at this talk when he was this guy, Ethan Marco, from Boston, I think, in US, delivered this talk about it, and it was kind of like, it was pretty much a revolutionary moment in the web industry, and people were just like, and he's still speaking now, and I've seen him speak last time actually in January, actually in Nottingham, a conference we were just talking about actually, and a very different subject entirely, but he's a very thoughtful and, you know, a very clever person, and he literally went on to write a book about responsive web design and subsequently obviously various other things, and became kind of initially the person to go to, and I was there kind of at this talk. It was like, you know, it shook the industry if you're really into your, you know, the design and development at that point. So I've gone on to sort of be very passionate, and basically I've been doing that pretty much since, you know, focusing on that since it was a thing. It is a thing you needed to start thinking about, going back years. And so, you know, a lot of the design we do now is actually mobile first. You know, or we think about it when we're designing the website. So it's not like, because the journey is often very different as well on a mobile or tablet. You have a smaller screen to play with, you know, and so you need to very much think about where positioning is and the size of your typography. So it's all the details which, if you want to have a really good experience it applies obviously to desktop, but you know, can be even more prevalent and more important on a mobile or tablet device.
I think it's really important. So Longhurst website, I built Longhurst on WordPress, and that's just from years and years ago of learning how to do this, because many years ago I couldn't afford to bring in somebody like you to do it, so I just taught myself WordPress, went out of part code, and so you're right. So my desktop website, beautiful, got website of the year for SME Northamptonshire. Okay. And we're now through to the national award. But you look at the mobile version, which is probably 50% of our site visitors, are probably 45%, 46% on analytics. If I look at the mobile version, it's not as good, and I didn't apply the mobile first, website second. I did it the other way around, clearly, because I just wanted to get a website up and everything else.
Not uncommon.
So maybe we should be bringing you in, Richard. to maybe the net outcome of this podcast is some business your way. So, brand identity is really passionate for me in Longhurst. I really want to make sure brand and what we represent as a business, from the logo through to the colour theme through to the consistency in the message was critical. Presumably you share that same passion with helping businesses, first of all, sort of, you know, create their identity. Presumably you can also, and this might be relevant to some of the STC members and Silverstone Park people listening to this, presumably you can go into an existing business that's already got a brand, but it might just need a freshen up, and help them do that. Is that something you do?
Yeah, I guess to a certain extent, sometimes it's more like brand extension or a brand refresh. You know, sometimes I've worked with a few clients where they're just like, they have an existing logo, and the premise of it is, you know, they don't want to start from scratch, but they might actually want to change the logo, or they just want to change the typography in the logo, or some elements of it, or, you know, they might want to keep part but not keep all of it, you know, or they might want to start from fresh, or you know, the message, obviously the company, the business is still the same, so they have certain things and they might want to keep and just or add to that. So it's a brand extension, so they might just have a logo, which they are very happy with, but then they have nothing else. We don't have any other brand assets which would go with it, you know, kind of like, you know, you're not saying every business should have a brand guidelines, you know, document, but if they're a bigger business, then that can be more applicable. If they're working with other companies and other companies that are likely to use their brand for something, they, you know, and have permission to do that, then you want to make sure that they're using that brand correctly and you know, the assets with that. So that could be, as I said, maybe they have a logo and they're fine with the logo and even a type in the logo, but then they actually want, okay, well, let's want to create a bit of a theme and a brand which, you know, would, you know, look at typography. I mean, something I'm actually quite passionate about in terms of my job, in terms of design, is something, you know, a lot of people just fall back on standard fonts or you know, just something else, and typography, there's actually, you know, there are a lot of good type, but there's a lot of detail in there, and like the typography can actually really portray, you know, elements of a brand. If a brand's quite fun or quirky, quite serious, you know, the type of organisation or business, you know, whether that's a small startup or you know, a theatre or a library or in an international company, you know, they'll all have a brand will have, a company will have a personality, you know, whether that's, you know, trustworthy and strictly corporate side of it, or playful, or serious and educational, then the typography can actually help portray that as well. So I'm just saying, I was probably going off a bit of a tangent.
No, it's good.
Something I like and pay a lot of attention to detail and making things very readable, but also that can actually reflect in like a brand guideline, and brands be part of it. So there's lots of good companies out there and good organisations who will pay attention to. I pay attention to that, and I subscribe to things like actually type creative typography type newsletters. So I get like highlights and where people are doing interesting things, and some of the companies who see who are doing it well, and whether you agree with their company. People like Uber. I'm not saying obviously they can be a controversial company, but they're a very good brand, and they have their own. So they've had their own custom typeface, literally a physical custom typeface for their whole website. They use is created, obviously, which is I don't do that. I couldn't create a custom typeface, but that's the importance of it. And I think there's other ones. Dropbox, I think, again, for example, they've had their own custom font created. These are huge organisations, but these are people who pay very much a lot of attention to detail on their design and brand and guidelines and things like that, and their message. And so it does.
There is method to the madness.
Method to the madness. I think maybe Airbnb as well. Got a funny feeling they had, but there's quite a lot of examples. And even one I was reading about today with an educational site in the US, maybe in like a museum or some sort of entity. And again, they had this font, and it was really nice, and you could see how it reflected. It actually rebranded using the font in part of their logo, but also they were actually using this typeface throughout their entire website.
Nice.
And marketing media, so
Okay, website, user interface design, user experiences, brand identity, e-commerce, digital strategy, basically anything to do with a company and the way it portrays its message digitally or otherwise. You can basically help them.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, some things I'm more busy with than others in terms of or I guess I specialise in.
And some of the clients which you sort of promote on the website, so we've got some big names here and some local names. So we've got Mercedes, Milton Keynes Council, Northamptonshire Council, University of Bolton, interestingly, and Autonomous Ideas, to name just 5 of a long list that I've sort of written down. So just sort of in a nutshell, so with the local authorities, the councils, MK Council and Northampton Council, what sort of stuff have you done there? Yeah, so I've worked
probably a couple of years ago now. I was working quite a bit on a few projects with Northamptonshire County Council, and that was on a few things actually. So one was for a series of iconography. So I created basically like, for people not sure what that is, literally the icons. So they wanted to create a new set which was going to be used on basically on their website, on various other elements. So I wasn't doing a whole website, I wasn't doing a whole project, I was just working with a team and creating some guidelines around iconography, and it was quite a big, reasonable sized project actually. It went on, it's quite a set of icons. Sounds quite simple, but it was just taking existing stuff and making a cohesive set, because they were, as you'll see in a lot of websites and probably on a lot of council websites actually, they tend to use quite a bit of iconography and symbols with their sections, and they were basically
standard stuff off WordPress or whatever.
There's nothing wrong. I use a lot of I sometimes use iconography on sites, and even in small elements, and one I'm working on right now, it has small elements of it, and I'm not creating the icons for that. It's just not the budget in this particular project to do it, and it's not necessary, because it doesn't need to be bespoke, but but it's still finding a nice part of that is I'm still will go and get work with a nice cohesive all the icons are by one single designer, and they all work well together, whereas often you'll see a mismatch of different stuff where you'll see different different thicknesses and things like that. So, and that's for me as well, I think it can be quite jarring in icons where you'll see one and they're clearly a bit of a mismatch. And
attention to detail.
It is attention to detail. So that was kind of part of one of the projects. Another was actually working on LGSS, which is their sort of Northamptonshire County Council run, but they're like a business entity within it who does other things basically. So that was actually working on the design. So I did the whole design for the website for them. I wasn't actually producing it because they had their internal development team. So for that, I was just brought in and working with them on the user experience and creating basically and a new color palette. So they had an existing logo, and they had a limited color palette from the logo, but we wanted to extend that. So that was actually created. Well, I guess that was probably an example of doing a bit of a extension and then not say refresh, but just adding to. They wanted to add a bit more. So part of that was also delivering a document with a bit more color palette and fonts and things like that. So that was a couple of projects for Northamptonshire. I've worked on a few things for Milton Keynes Council. They were working really with the culture team there. So
what's a culture team?
Well, culture team, so they're the entity within Milton Keynes Council who are dealing with more like the arts and culture type projects within Milton Keynes. So I'm not sure if every council will have that, but Milton Keynes has got that. So some more of the things like some of the events that happen around Milton Keynes, but are council led or council backed or council funded. So that's sort of often projects around that. One of the projects we're actually on was the Capital of Culture, which sadly the projects I worked on for Milton Keynes Council have actually have gone live, but they've never gone or never gone. Then sort of disappeared because of other things. But we were working on, myself with another local designer. We're working on the bid for 2023 European Capital of Culture, and we were working with the council culture team. It was a really good project, quite interesting. Very interesting, being that I'm, sort of, it's been brought up and raised when I was in Keynes, it's sort of, I guess I call that MK my home. So it was, we were working on that and producing the website for it, which went live, and unfortunately, this is all around the time of, the Brexit and stuff like that, and actually we were, as UK were then literally, as the bids were going in, UK were taken out of the Capital of Culture. So we're no longer currently eligible for 2023. So
all that works,
and it still existed. I think it might still be online as well at the moment, actually, still. So just the site that we produced, but yeah. So that was a good project to work on, really interesting. I really enjoyed it, and then it was just obviously a bit of a shame that happened, and it sort of obviously, canned it to a certain extent. Another one was working on a Culture MK project, which was again quite interesting, something I'm quite passionate about myself, which might touch on a bit later. But and then actually, sadly, that was canned quite far down the line by someone in the council that decided it wasn't going to, they weren't going to decide to do this project and pursue something else slightly different.
Well, let's keep talking about that now. So this is MK Culture, some sort, a sort of community stroke, sort of what's happening, sort of feel, website or sort of communication hub. So what is it that you're thinking about, sort of branching off into?
Yeah, something with a couple of friends / sort of colleagues to a certain extent, based in Milton Keynes. It's something we've been talking about. One of them approached me actually about who's very much involved in events at a big venue in Milton Keynes. Approached me many years ago and said he really wanted to do something and spoke to me about it, and it's something was talking about on and off for years. And then basically, I think even we'd actually spoke, because we were working on part like other culture projects with the council. We actually mentioned it to them. I'm not sure that's how they, not saying it is how they started to decided to roll with the idea or decided to push the idea, but we ended up working on this, come back to this project for Culture MK, which then got canned. So obviously we were hopeful. We thought, this is great. We were actually going to do this, and council are going to, we're going to work with them, and they're going to sort of help fund it, and they are going to fund it and back it and promote it. That's it. It got canned. So we kind of like, feels like they're allegedly going to be doing it in some form, but we'd yet to see the proof of that, and we don't think it's going to be what we wanted to see it be, and I think what a lot of people will want to see it happen. So we're exploring the idea of pursuing and creating a website, and probably other media associated with that, around culture and arts and other stuff that's going on in Milton Keynes. It's not going to just be like art specific. It's just going to be, it can be design, it can be creative. It will probably be onto all other sort of things like food and events happening around that. But really, not a business led kind of approach where it's some of the other, I won't say competitors, but other entities in Milton Keynes probably do have, and they're very much full of ads and things like that. And we appreciate you need to fund it or have some sort of ongoing money behind it. But yeah, we were basically literally very early stages, but we decided that we are just going to do something. We're kind of like, to a certain extent, we was hopeful for these other people, other organisations backing it or being involved in it, and it's not really happened. So we are in the process of very early on, but getting something going.
Watch this space,
and we're just still generating the ideas of what that will be. But it'll be it'll be stories, it'll be events, it'll be things that are happening and things that have happened, and basically journalism really, and actually have proper people writing, not just us. We'll have people come in and other than just doing it ourselves, photographers, videographers, people who, editors who write content and actually produce hopefully some good journalism and something interesting and exciting, and that will also help people find stuff that's going on, whether you live in Milton Keynes or you're coming to Milton Keynes.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the idea. We're early on, and we will be hopefully speaking to some people down the line to sort of help get that off the ground as well.
Nice. Milton Keynes Geek Night. So not only are you the sort of founder and designer at Pixel Creation, which you sort of launched in 2003, but you're also one of two individuals who put together and launched Milton Keynes Geek Night, or MKGN, which you launched 7 years ago.
Yes.
So talk to us about Milton Keynes Geek Night. For those that have never heard it, those that are part of the STC and Silverstone Park and wider, because we've got people listening around the world to this, we know, including Damien in Australia, who I met on Safari this summer. So Damien, big shout out to you, mate. Milton Keynes Geek Night. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, it's an event in Milton Keynes, a quarterly event that, as I said, I set up. I decided to start with a friend of mine, David Hughes, who we still co-run it together. And yeah, we started in 2012. But a bit about the event, we run it, as I said, 4 times a year. It's an evening event, but it is basically a sort of mini conference in the evening, really. So it's not really a networking event, I would say. But yeah, because I go to networking events, and I still don't like the term. This is very, very informal event. People have been coming. We've had some people, I think, have literally been to every single event, and we're up to about 31 now of our main events. Plus, we've had a full-day conference, and we also run, I believe, 3 or 4 mental health events as well, specials.
Nice.
Not for a while, but we were running that in collaboration with some other UK whole-wide things going on at the same time, mental health awareness, and. But we're up to, on our normal run of things, we're about, I think, 31. 2012 we started, and we usually have 5 speakers come in for each event. Occasionally we change the format, including our next one in December is actually just 3 speakers, 3 headline speakers we call it. So usually we have 2 headline speakers, which used to be shorter, I think about 20-25 minutes. Now we run them at 30 minutes. Roughly each talk, and then we have 3 roughly 5-minute talks, a lot shorter, plus we have like 60-second proper like pitch, not say pitch slots, but like we tried to not to have them too commercial. It's like the idea is more like, if you need help with something, you're looking for, you're looking for staff, or you're running your own event or something, Sometimes they do get a bit commercial. But yeah, they're proper 60-second timed. We limit those to 10.
Elevator pitch or a shout out.
Elevator pitch, basically, yeah. We limit those to 10, so we sort of, maximum 10 in the evening. But they always go down well as well, so people get an opportunity to get up. So it's quite good fun. We run it at Milton Keynes Gallery now. We've on our 3rd venue since we started. We were back in the day at the Buzzy in Milton Keynes, which is for anyone who knows, it was the old bus station. Was also once Chicago's nightclub.
Chicago's.
Yeah, back in the day.
I remember Chicago's.
Yeah, so do I.
So
less said about that, the better, I think, probably. But yeah, so that was the old bus station. It's actually a listed building as well. But we went. It was a great space, and
skateboard park next to that.
It's very new. There's actually there's another event. We'll say event is I think it's still running. Is MK Skate actually? If anyone's come across that, because it's actually an iconic skate. Branching off, this is totally nothing to do with me at all, but there's actually it was and is an iconic skate home for some of the top skaters in the country of past and today. Lots of films have been made there, and there's actually an exhibition in Milton Keynes at the moment. So just as a random side note, maybe check it out if it's of interest. But yeah, it's a good venue. Sadly, that we lost that due to the people who run that event or a charity, and the council kind of couldn't work it out. It was all to do with the parking, basically. To cut a long story short, but it's not, unfortunately, not used for an awful lot at the moment. But anyway, we lost that venue, and we're now in our third space, which is the reopened new gallery extension. We're in the Sky Room, which is if those of you who haven't been to anything, there's been quite a few conferences there recently as well. I was there at Digital Futures event last week with City Fibre, sort of or backed event. STC were actually there. Pim was there actually with a stand as well, and we bumped into each other. But yeah, so it's a great space with 150 capacity and seated in a state of the art. Basically, it's like a cinema because they do show Curzon Cinema there as well. So it's a great space.
Why does MK Geek Night exist?
Well, basically, and David and I used to go to a lot of web/design events around the country, sometimes further afield, in Europe as well, occasionally. So we used to go to full-day conferences. Occasionally, we used to go to another. We didn't create the name, Oxford Geek Night, basically. It's been going for longer than we have. It's actually split to a certain extent. And I'm sure they won't take too much offence. We kind of certainly surpassed that in terms of it's a bit of a bigger, ours is a bit bigger now than theirs is. It's just, but it's great. That's how we used to go to that. It's not too far from us, Oxford. We used to drive over again on the evening and really casual, sort of some speakers, and we've got some friends over Oxford Way, and that was great. And basically back then in 2012, it must have been, I was kind of like, well, we haven't got anything in Milton Keynes. And there was nothing in terms of meetups, anything related to, there wasn't really any kind of thing like that going on at all. Like there's loads of meetups, not your traditional networking breakfast stuff, but there was nothing really else going on at all in terms of business, design, creative, technical, nothing. Not saying we were the first, but there wasn't really anything at all. And as I said, let's basically convince my friend David to do it with me and start something. And
here we are.
The initial thoughts were, let's just do something, we get together, get some people together in like a bar, pub, and just chat, likewise people. But we decided, no, let's do it properly and get speakers in. And yeah, we did. And we were lucky to have two very, very good established speakers who were kind of friends. Our very first event who do and still do speak internationally. We start, so that was kind of like, I think we had approximately 100 people at our first event. It was free. We were free back then. We were free for a long time. We do charge now because, just because of costs are higher and venue costs. And so it's not a money-making entity. It's it does go back into it. So, but yeah, we are here back nearly 7.5 years later, and still going. And
so for those listening, so first of all, congratulations, that's really good. And so for those listening to this, certainly those that are part of the cluster or Silverstone Park, so who attends the MK Geek Night? And so if people listening to this going, that sounds interesting, that sounds like a bit of me. So who would that be?
It is quite a broad range. A lot of the talks. Our talks are actually very varied, and we kind of like that, and I think a lot of our attendees like that, because so one talk may be very, very specific on something very codey, really technical, which I'm in the industry, and some talks go over my head, don't get me wrong, but there's a good portion of the audience might be some developers who are really, that they'll get a lot from that and they'll really enjoy that, whereas another talk may be very creative. talking about design or print-based stuff, or like a product design to a certain extent, or user experience coming on, or content strategy, social media marketing, things like that. We've had talks on mental health, getting away from your screen in terms of all kind of things, in terms of exercise, other hobbies, passions, photography, so there's we had a real broad church of type of talks. We're sitting here recording a podcast when we had a fantastic talk a few events ago by the guy who Christian Payne goes in the name of Documentally. He's actually he's very well known for doing just podcasts and audio recordings, and done a lot of journalism as well, and fascinating guy, and a bit of a specialist in terms of audio, and talked a lot about that, and also how to record it, and gave tips on equipment and things like that. So it's a real, the subjects are very varied, so the audience is very varied because of that. There is a large amount of people in the design and creative and web areas who will come, whether they'll be freelance or small agencies or in a team in a big company. We've got, I know there's a lot of people coming from Network Rail. They have a digital team based in Network Rail in Milton Keynes. So I think there's about a team, quite a decent chunk of their team, like 8 of them are coming along to the next event. I'm sure I saw that on the list. So
nice.
So it's nice to get that. But we also just get a lot of people who are just, because some of the talks are going, although we call it MK Geek Night, I kind of regret that now. A lot of talks aren't geeky whatsoever. That can put people off, because some are, but don't get me wrong, but some aren't. But we've had some ones which are geeky, but actually just really good fun. We've had some talks, about laugh out loud, kind of comedy talks, and just really different. And so I think that attracts people who just might be interested in that. But we've had business owners, all sorts of stuff, because we've had, I think the subject matter is very varied. So,
I think the name's good. I think that's what it says.
We can't change it now.
That's what it says on the tin, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you're getting a group of like-minded people together who, like the same stuff. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that.
No.
So,
and at the end of the day, we actually go, we tend to, because it's, again, we feel it's a bit of a mouthful, we tend to go by MKGN anyway these days. So it's a bit shorter, easier to brand as well. So.
And so you mentioned obviously bumping into Pim at a recent event. Obviously, Pim's CEO of the Silverstone Technology Cluster, and so you have become a relatively new ambassador for the STC. So talk to us about that, just briefly. We don't have to spend too long on that, but basically why you've agreed and accepted the invitation to become an ambassador, and what your hopes are for that role, not just within sort of Silverstone and this technology community, but also clearly further afield, including Milton Keynes, your own community where you are. What are you thinking? Yeah,
so I mean, to that really came about because Ros, who probably a lot of your listeners who know is Ros Bird, attended Geek Night, basically, I don't know, probably a good couple of years ago now, I suspect it's been, introduced by a good friend of I guess, Geek Night, but also just a personal friend of David and myself, very good friends of David, who I run it with, and also he's also become a client as well now, and yeah, he knew Ros. Ros came along one day, and I think she speaks very highly of it and really enjoyed it, and the diversity of the talks. So much so that Silverstone Park are actually has sponsored every event, or will be sponsoring every event, the 4 events this year. So they are a partner for us as well, just because they wanted to be involved. And I think that was great to have them on board as a sponsor. So Ros sort of came along, and we met through that, and she's been generally regularly attending. Also now they often come, or she comes with various other people involved with Silverstone Park or the cluster, I think, who haven't been before, so it's kind of nice, almost like bringing them along and experience it, because I think she talks about it quite a bit, and I end up basically by invite sort of getting involved with a few events. Ros introduced me at a few things because I think she was keen to sort of see, and I think basically because there's a lot of different type of, largely a different type of audience in our community, and obviously we have, like 150 people there, but obviously we have a wider community and regular attendees over the years. That's bigger in around Milton Keynes, and a lot of that is in they're experts in their industry. Whether that's about a specific coding language or design or something. And yes, I think there's obviously, we are very Milton Keynes, and Silverstone, obviously very close. Milton Keynes is part of the cluster. So I think the idea of, and how I've ended up becoming an ambassador, so I've sort of been on board for a little while, but I haven't been able to probably get as involved as I like. I'm not based at Silverstone Park, so I'm not, I'm a very different business and a small business, and compared to, I guess, a lot of the people here. But I think it's try and bridge the gap between those communities to sort of hopefully, get some of the audience from MK Geek Night to maybe attend some of the events that are happening around Silverstone. And the idea is maybe hopefully the communities can work together and kind of coexist, but kind of like integrate and in some form or another, whether it's through some of the events or actually helping so helping each other. So that's kind of early on, but I think that's something we're looking. We've got a get together this week to sort of just generally how the cluster can, I think, evolve maybe. And what it can
it's
do.
one of the board meetings.
The board meetings.
We commence in 11th of November, the date of the recording, just a date stamp it. So, no, I think that's a good idea. And actually thinking through, actually I'll come back to you on this in due time, but as I mentioned previously, we've started video recording some of these, and we do some mastermind sessions, and so that there may be some good value in having a couple of people from sort of MK Geek Night and a couple of people from the STC involved in a sort of collaborative mastermind session. We'd identify what the subject matter would be and sort of just pre-agree what to talk about, but that might help certainly to help promote to both communities.
I think so. I think
the
there's
value
definitely some ideas that could be good, and I think we've battered the ideas. Whether it's down the line, there's you do something like a hackathon or do something where somebody organise. I don't know. We're not saying we will do that, but I'm just saying there's like I think Ros was and PM talking about speaking to people here. Maybe we could do something, or at least to try and bring those communities together. We'll see how people could help. But I
think it's a good idea.
Yeah.
Richard, we're literally 45 minutes into this interview. Hasn't that gone quickly?
That's gone quick.
So we've covered off who you are, career, Pixel, MK Geek Night, who you work with client-wise, MK Culture, and potentially the evolution of a new project in the pipeline, STC. So some quick personal stuff, and then we'll close off with the last couple of questions. So you tell me that you are a keen cyclist, both on road and cyclocross. And so I wasn't sure what cyclocross was. And so just in a brief nutshell for our wonderful listeners, what is cyclocross?
Well, a lot of people probably know what road riding is and road bikes are, and cyclocross is a sport which came out of I think traditionally like Holland and Belgium, that kind of area, and is typically done in the off season, so in the winter. For usually it's by tradition it's a competitive thing, so it's not. It is something you can do for leisure to a certain extent, but that's just kind of like riding off road on a bike, which is a cyclocross bike is basically a road bike. So it looks like a road bike, but it has a slightly different geometry, and it has more like mountain bike tires on it. So you tend to have knobbly tires on what looks basically is more like a road bike. The geometry is different because you basically pick it up sometimes and you sling it over your shoulder, or you lift it up because you either have to run up muddy banks. The idea is actually you're racing around a course usually between 45 minutes to an hour, depending on your age and category and things like that. Even at international level, like the senior internationals, that's an hour. It's no more than an hour. Well, it's about an hour. And you race at an extreme. It's very intense. It's very good fun. You get very muddy and dirty. You probably fall off quite a bit, especially when it gets muddy and wet, as it has done more recently the last couple of weeks. So it's basically running around a taped course. So it's like these staked grounds, and there's like all tapes, and so it's very tight, really technical courses. Barriers thrown in, so you have to literally jump off your bike and lift over, jump onto your bike while it's still moving, and jump off your bike while it's still moving. So it's a very technical thing. Also, you don't have to be fit, because there's definitely, you can start anywhere.
Well, I think you've got to be quite fit.
Well, there's people in the races. The races are quite broad, and the thing about it is very accessible. It's actually one of the more accessible competitive sports there are. Like road racing is seen as being quite serious, and it is a bit serious. I've been doing it for quite a few years, and it can be a bit. Feels a bit more like that. Whereas cyclocross is very fun. The races that I do is it's called Central. I'm in the Central League, so it's not regionally based. Basically, there's different leagues around the country. which spans around this area. So Milton Keynes a lot. There's sort of Swanbourne, out towards Northampton, a lot of Northamptonshire, occasionally down towards London. So it is spread out Bedford as well, so some this way. There's definitely quite a few Northampton, Kettering way as well. But there's races go on from like 9 o'clock in the morning from like the under, what does it start at? Under 8s maybe? So, and literally then through to, you have all different veteran, 60 plus, and then the senior races, which is kind of like, people don't like to say the main race because it's not, but it's like the longest race. It's an hour. The only one is an hour, and I guess it's usually the most competitive race in terms of you've got guys who are elite road riders who will be doing it. But you literally can be you can in a cyclocross race. You could, in theory, and you can ride with sometimes people who might be a national champion who are competing internationally. And it is quite. Say it's a niche sport, but it's not that niche. It's on Eurosport, and it's
nice.
It is a big sport.
But you do all right. You compete in it. So for the road team, you're a road team captain.
Yes.
So you're obviously pretty decent at this stuff.
Somehow I've become the road team captain.
So should we expect to see you on Eurosport anytime soon?
I don't think so, sadly not. I'm not too old to have got into that. And,
not too old.
Not enough talent.
Not too old. Look like a young man, Richard. So, fine. I'm going to close it off. So, last 2 questions are. First one's about embarrassing mistakes, but you've already said that earlier that you're perfect and you haven't got any embarrassing mistakes. No, you didn't say that, but you did say that you couldn't think of anything that was specifically embarrassing, but you've obviously made mistakes like we all have, and there's some learning there. So I think that'll probably link into, unless you've suddenly thought of something.
No, I haven't had a chance to know.
Why don't we link it into, to save you that, why don't we link it into the last question, which is all about life lessons, and maybe the most overriding and the biggest of the life lessons, so that if you were talking to a younger version of Richard back in the day when you were sort of starting out, what's the one thing that you've learned that you'd like to pass on, certainly to our younger listeners? We've got students from a number of the local tech colleges listening to this, so what bit of advice would you give them? I
think for me it's not a very specific thing, but I have made mistakes, and I've still got, frustratingly, I've occasionally, gone back and done very similar mistakes. So, sure. You do learn from them, but then, there's
sometimes repeat them.
I have repeated them, then you kind of kick yourself when you have done it even more so. But yeah, it is listen to your gut. It is go sometimes by, do go on instinct, and listen to that voice in your head when something, maybe not quite right, a decision, and then don't try and go with it, because it usually does come back to burn you in some form or another. And some of the things, I started a business around the time I was also starting my own Pixel. I was actually went into business with someone else. It didn't particularly cost me anything financially, but it was clearly I was a bit naive in terms of this relationship. I didn't know the guy well enough to start the business with, and it became apparent that we were definitely not on the same level in terms of, how we thought and how we went about our business, basically. That's
quite common. I had that originally my first business, and so I wouldn't beat yourself up about that.
I have learned by that mistake, and that's not something I have repeated. I would go. I haven't specifically gone into business with anyone else since, but I would do that, and almost to a certain extent, the idea around this culture project is that may turn into that, and the people I'm in, they are friends, and people I would do it with.
So you trust your gut with that.
Trust your gut, but it was more come back to actually like client work actually, whereas working with a client before, annoyingly I've repeated that and worked with that client again, you get a gut reaction is like, I think this project could be really hard work, and this client could be really hard work, and they kind of didn't feel a gel with that particular client, and I did work with them, and it was really painful and really horrible, and went on a lot longer, and probably, the money wasn't too bad from it, but at the same respect, it became quite monotonous.
You didn't enjoy it.
And I didn't enjoy it, and probably financially and a long-term thing, because it just became so painful. We got there, And annoyingly, I have actually done that again, and with the same client. So I don't know why. Many years on, and I was thinking, let's approach it a bit differently, but it still ended up being a bit like that.
Sometimes the most powerful thing you could do is say no.
That's the thing, and I think I've not done it, but that's the closest I've been to basically
do it.
Sacking off a
next
client.
time. Do it.
And I know, and I think you have got to be a bit brave to do that, and but not be afraid to do that. And if you didn't listen to your gut and you start it, but things aren't working out, is to say, look, I think cut those ties. Sometimes that can be the best thing, just I think in probably lots of different businesses.
Richard, thank you so much for coming on the show. So for those listening to this who want to get in contact with Richard, I'm going to put his contact details and website links for Pixel Creations and MK Geek Night in the show notes. If you can forward those to me, that'd be really good. But clearly, for those listening, you're free to engage with Pixel Creations if you want any support with sort of website and branding and design and everything that comes along with that and strategies. And clearly, we look forward to seeing your involvement with the STC and hopefully better connections and connecting the dot with Milton Keynes Geek Night, because I'm sure, as you've said, there's lots and lots of natural crossover with your community and our community. So
just to slightly, just only because I haven't mentioned it, there is the next event is actually next month. So
what's the date for that?
It's December the 5th.
Okay.
Same as your podcast.
Christmas tipple.
Yes. I saw the date. I saw that, and I was like, I definitely can't do that. If you're not going to Chris's Christmas tipple, then it's December the 5th at Milton Keynes Gallery. I'm not trying to, just because I want to make people aware that it's coming up. We have only got literally a few tickets left for it, so if you did want to come, take a look quickly.
So I just need to just work out in my mind now when this is going to air. So it might be.
It might not. It might miss it. It might be after it.
Who knows?
So the event might have happened by then.
It would have been a serious. But if not, obviously, if you're listening to this, you're not coming to the tipple. Clearly, go and attend MK Geek Night. Otherwise, there'll be another one in
March
next year.
Is the first one next year.
Fine, and hopefully Ros will be promoting that through the STC anyway, so people will find out. So, Richard, wonderful. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks, Chris.
The Inside Silverstone podcast is produced by the team at Longhurst for the benefit of those with a passion for all things tech, engineering and innovation. For more information, please visit longhurst.co.uk/Inside Silverstone, whilst also remembering to give us a 5 out of 5 star rating on iTunes. Please note that neither Chris Broome or Longhurst work for Silverstone Park, Silverstone Circuit or Silverstone Technology Cluster.